I'll start by just saying happy and harmonious New Year to you all. And of course, we're a reconvened meeting tonight, so we don't have the normal start to our agenda, but the bit that does remain is a few moments contemplation before we commence the meeting, so if you'd care to do that. Right, councillors, you should all have in front of you a single sheet headed substantive recommendation. And just a few words of explanation of where we're going. You will recall that at the last meeting, our proceedings were suspended under item 12, and we had discussed amendments, or an amendment which basically incorporated a motion that had been put, and it was taken as if it were an amendment to the recommendation from the committee. That amendment was carried, and we didn't then either debate or vote on the substantive recommendation as amended. There has been some exchange of correspondence about how this reconvened meeting should proceed. And I have listened to the input of many, and I have expressed my preferred way forward, which I have to say I think is the right way forward and stick to. But for a whole host of reasons, I'm going to allow the members who were not present at the previous meeting to take part in and vote on this particular motion, although the fact they weren't there. Both of the members to whom it applies are here, and they have reassured me, in writing if you like, but very vigorously reassured me, that they have watched the webcast and therefore believe themselves fully appraised of the previous debate. One might argue whether watching something on the webcast is the same as taking part in the debate and being present in the room. I personally am not sure that it is, but as I say, I am tending towards and erring towards the thought that to exclude anybody from a debate is quite draconian, and on this occasion, though it would be following a precedence that has been set in other committees, this isn't a committee and it wasn't given in advance as an intention. The other thing I will say though is, and worth bearing in mind as we proceed through this debate, which I do hope will be on an orderly basis, if this motion is defeated tonight, or if the recommendation, as I should call it, is defeated, we don't have anything on the table, and the matter then is back with ARGA to come forward with some recommendations with these having failed. And that might be food for thought as to whether that is something that is going to be either welcomed by members who have to go through that tortuous process, or indeed what the public might think of that as a process. So I leave you with that thought. Now, rather unkindly, but it was something that emerged through the process, which I think most people will agree has been an unusual set of circumstances, hopefully never to be repeated, but if something like this happens again, I do hope we'll have some sounder constitutional support on how it should proceed. But as I say, it has meant one or two things, and I will say in passing, I am sorry that those people who were unhappy with my earlier declared expectation of how things would move forward at the debate didn't come forward with their protestations a little sooner, so that we weren't in last 11th hour panics as we were. And one of the consequences of this is that in looking at how we were going to handle it, it's been a bit unkind on the chair of ARGA, who hasn't had time to think about whether or how she might present the debate on the full motion. There is no need for somebody to present the debate because it has already been done at the previous meeting. But just to sort of start it off in a sort of fairly normal fashion, I have invited the chair of ARGA, if she so wishes, indirectly, and I think you have had the message, haven't you, to introduce the debate. But if you do not wish to, that's fine, and I will just call on any members who wish to address council on the topic to do so. So can I ask, Chair, are you happy to introduce it? Point of order.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. I mean, obviously you've had a difficult evening thus far, I'm sure, and I'm going to add to that, I think. I'm sorry that you've been bullied into the position that you had to adopt this evening. I make a point, in addition to what you've given us in terms of advice about the voting rights of members here tonight, and I respect the view you've come to in regard to the two members who were absent last time. We'll live with that, of course. But I make a point that I've made before. There are members in this chamber, those sitting opposite, who quite frankly should not be involved in this debate this evening, nor have the right to vote on the substantive motion before us. There are a number of members opposite who are named specifically within the Ernst & Young report on issues which are yet to be resolved satisfactorily, in my view, and certainly haven't been subjected to the public law commentary that we seek by this motion. And quite frankly, for them to be taking part in a vote on a report that names them specifically is unacceptable. If they have any integrity, they won't be involved in it, but I make this point on the basis I have no idea how the people, well, let me finish, Councillor Mitchell, if I may, Mr. Mayor. The point that I make, and I name the councillors specifically, Councillors Finney, Golding, Marks and Donnell, and there's probably a couple of others if I want to go through the list, should not be able to vote in this discussion tonight, following this discussion tonight. Now, I say this, Mr. Mayor, let me just quickly make the last point, irrespective of which way they might vote at the end of the debate. Mind you, I wouldn't hold my breath on that, I have to tell you. Yeah, but they should not be allowed to vote, Mr. Mayor, and I seek a ruling on that.
Councillor Potter, you've made your point, not excessively, I hope, but I don't believe that I or anybody can ask anybody to leave and to absent themselves from the vote. It is up to an individual councillor to believe whether they've got a conflict, and it is for them to decide whether they should withdraw on the basis that you have described. But if nobody chooses to do so, then that is their choice. And that's where the matter rests. I see all sorts of hands going up, but I'm going to start with Councillor Keating, whose hand I believe was up first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may raise 2 points. The first one, a relatively simple one. On the document presented as the composite motion, or the composite substantive recommendation, the second paragraph, penultimate line, talks about the next full council meeting. I think for accuracy that ought to be this council meeting. Second paragraph, the penultimate line, second last line of that paragraph, it talks about recommend to the next full meeting, next full council meeting. I believe that should be...
No, because, please sit down. Let me answer what I think is the answer to what you have raised, Councillor Keating, and that is, this is a reconvened meeting. So the next meeting is the next normal meeting of the council. It isn't this. This isn't the next meeting. So I understand where you're going, but that's, I don't believe, right.
If I may make the point, the substantive point I wanted to make, Mr. Mayor, on a point of order, I believe on 2 occasions during the last meeting, or during the first part of this adjourned meeting, on 2 occasions you identified that it was the proper procedure that only the people who were present at the beginning of that debate would be able to vote at the end of that debate. I believe that you did that, first of all, in accordance with standard practice for good committee managements and standard practice for good chairs, and a practice which has been exercised judiciously and compulsorily in this council for a number of years. Additionally, if I might say from Mr. Mayor, whenever a council becomes nearly hung, or whereby the absence of one or other parties, members of the party, can swing a vote, it is not the time to be bullied into changing standards. That is the time when you have to have the standard practice applied routinely, and if there is a problem, to do it when there is no difficulty.
It's getting beyond a point of order, more speech, so please...
I'm simply explaining the point of order.
Yeah, no, well, it's rather a long explanation and unnecessary, if I can respond, and that is basically to say, firstly, I accept that I indicated at the last meeting that we would continue with the same makeup. I have to say that was a view that I held, and still basically fundamentally hold, as being the best under normal circumstances. To say that that is how we have arranged things in the past is not quite accurate, because the council chamber is different in terms of how it works. There's no possibility for substitutions or anything like that. I have made the ruling. I understand why you are unhappy with the ruling, but that is the ruling, and we could spend another hour discussing why or not I made the ruling, but the purpose of having the prerogative of making a ruling is that the ruling is made and shouldn't be challenged. And I think on that basis I cannot accept what you're saying as a challenge, and it will not change my ruling. I'm sorry about that. I saw Councillor Raphael.
Mr. Mayor, just some clarity. Councillor Potter made a comment about certain members on this side and left it rather open as though there may be others to whom he refers. If it is the ruling of the Borough Solicitor and the Chief Executive that it is totally proper that everyone who is currently in this chamber is in this chamber to vote on any and all matters, then that's an end of the matter. So could we have that ruling, and then what Councillor Potter has said can be completely ignored?
My ruling is that everybody here tonight is a party to the debate and can vote, and it is up to them themselves to understand whether they have a conflict of interest and to declare it. I cannot from the chair determine that somebody has a conflict of interest. Somebody has expressed a view that they should perhaps think about it and draw their own conclusions. If nobody feels that the point that was made by Councillor Potter is valid, then they must act on it, and then they're subject to a further challenge at some stage from the Standards Committee. as having behaved improperly, but that's for them to judge. It's not for me to judge whether they are behaving improperly by taking part.
Mr. Mayor, may I come back on that? May I come back on that? Because one wants to make sure things are done properly, is the Borough Solicitor or the Chief Executive urging members or wanting to have a conversation with any particular members to urge them not to take part? But no, they may want to give free advice.
I have no reason to believe that the Borough Solicitor, the Chief Executive differs from what I have ruled, and I'm leaving it at that. I don't wish to continue that debate any further. Councillor Marks, you put your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A follow-on. I believe I was named. It's quite a shock, but I heard my name come out earlier. Could I please have some officer advice as to where I stand on this, please? Because I am keen, as are all people on this side, to do the correct thing. Thank you.
I am inviting the Chief Executive to seek to address your comment.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not in a position to give a ruling. It's not my job. And ultimately, as has been indicated, it is for the members, individual members of the council, to determine whether or not they feel that they have any conflict which would preclude them from being involved in the debate or being part of the vote. My personal view, having looked at the position regarding the Arga IGA in the round, is that there, on the basis of the information available to me, I don't feel obliged or urged to advise any member that they have to declare an interest.
Okay. Is this a point of order, Councillor? Right. I saw Councillor West first. If I doing Councillor Cubiton injustice, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you'll permit me a point of order. On the 7th of January, you wrote to all members, and in that letter, you set out your decision and your ruling regarding this issue about whether members who were not present at the last meeting in December could vote at this particular council meeting. You further wrote to all members on the 8th of January, reinforcing that and explaining your position.
Councillor West, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt.
Yes.
Please be seated, Councillor West.
Can I finish it?
No, please be seated, Councillor West.
Democracy is dying tonight.
No, Councillor West, the point is you are seeking to continue the debate about who can take part. I have... Right, okay. Okay, I shall take it because I appreciate you're a group of one and need to have some exposure. Off you go.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Mayor. And as a leader of the UKIP group, just to continue further from the point that I was making, you further continued on the 8th of May and sent an email to members clarifying and also reinforcing the decision and ruling that you'd made. The question that I have for you, Mr. Mayor, that obviously in the interest of clarity, because no one outside of this chamber really has a clue of what is going on, in the interest of clarity and democracy, would you consider stating what has changed substantially between your email on the 8th of January and your decision tonight? And if nothing substantial has actually changed, can you please highlight what advice you have been given between the 8th of January and tonight, which has caused you to change your decision from the initial decision on the 7th of January? Thank you.
Order, please. Order. Right. I have no difficulty in explaining that I, in the role of the mayoralty, have to try and take into account the will of the council and what works best in the interests of democracy. I explained my judgment. I was very careful not to say a decision. I explained what my judgment was about the circumstances that prevailed. And the two things that have made me reach the final conclusion I have, which I did in truth only a matter of minutes before the meeting started, because I felt that there were persuasive points on both sides. And I have to say, as the Chief Executive would confirm, his take on the situation was the other side of mine, and so I didn't discount that either. But my main concern was that those members who were potentially being excluded had not known beforehand that that might happen. In other words, in most of the cases where the committee structure had to stay, or the committee membership had to stay the same, there was advance notice that there wouldn't be the possibility to make a change. That was point number one. The other is that I am personally persuaded that it is always better to include people rather than to exclude people. And I would like us to have a debate tonight that is meaningful, that nobody can come back at the end of the day and say, you or one side won that debate because of manipulation of the membership of the debate to achieve a certain result. I think we could have a good, honest debate tonight and then finish up with a good, honest decision where everybody has taken part and have a satisfactory conclusion. But you wouldn't be happy. That's firstly disrespectful, and I expect no more comments like that. You wouldn't be happy if the points of order raised by your side had not been taken, and I'd take points of order from wherever they come up to a certain limit. So I expect better behaviour, and it's not funny. The Chief Executive is going to make a couple of observations. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, they're not regarding the issues as such, but I do feel obliged to remind Council of what constitutes a point of order and what the Constitution says about the role of the Mayor. On the first point, a point of order shall relate only to an alleged breach of a full council procedure rule or of a statutory provision. I haven't yet heard a point of order that addresses either of those points. The Mayor is here as chair, exercising, in effect, a common law right to determine the way in which the meeting will be run. But if any member thought that they had raised a procedural point, and therefore a valid point of order, which they haven't, in my view, you then go to the Constitution and find that the ruling of the Mayor as to the construction or application of any procedure rule shall not be challenged. So, Mr. Mayor, you would have the right, of course, to use your discretion to hear points that aren't points of order, but equally you have the right to proceed to the debate on the basis that your ruling shall not be challenged.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. As I said before, and I repeat, it is my wish to be as inclusive as possible. I don't want people to leave the chamber and say, but I didn't have an opportunity to make this very valid point. And that's why I'm being generous in my interpretation of the rules. But I do expect some respect in terms of the decisions I'm making, not on a personal self-interest level, but on a sincere desire to make sure that this council runs in an orderly fashion and reaches conclusions with which we can all respect, and that the members of the public can respect. And I think sometimes we're having difficulty in maintaining that. I did indicate to Councillor Cubitt that I would allow her to speak, and after that, I think really we need to get into the debate, otherwise we'll be here all night debating the debate.
Thank
I,
you.
no.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's following on from the point that Councillor Raphael makes, and I think it's an extremely valid point, and I'm afraid that one of the reasons why we're here tonight for a second meeting is because there is some very grave concerns over the governance of this council. Now, the Chief Executive has a team of solicitors. They're highly paid lawyers that work exclusively for our council. The council, I would like as a point of order to know why the Chief Executive, neither the Chief Executive nor the solicitor present here today, feels that it is necessary or incumbent upon them to opine on whether those members have a right or not to vote on this matter. It has to be the responsibility of the Chief Executive and his solicitor to answer the question.
Please, no. We have the structure in the council that we have. The Chief Executive is an advisor to the council in many forms and to the mayoralty under these circumstances, and I am perfectly happy to take the advice and make my own judgment based on that advice. The advice is advice, it is not a decision, and I have to judge whether that advice is advice I seek to accept. And that's what I intend to do. Councillor Harvey, and then that is it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A point of order in relation to 321 of the Constitution in terms of voting in this chamber and the conduct of voting. In response to the Chief Executive, can I say two things? Firstly, the Chief Executive was right that it is not his business and is not his job, and he should have stopped there, because the Chief Executive has no role in the standards process. He has absolutely no role. Therefore, his personal view is his personal view, and it has no place in this chamber. Those members who have been named are all under investigation as part of the Ernst & Young report. They were all interviewed in that context or not, or named or not.
No,
the evidence.
sorry, Councillor Harvey, end of the matter. I have ruled that it's up to them to make their own...
That's my point,
well,
Chair.
that's it.
That
Thank
it is
you.
up to the individual member alone
Yep.
in terms of
Fine.
personal and prejudicial interest.
Councillor Harvey, that's it. I am now moving to the debate, and I am asking Councillor Cubitt whether she wishes to... sorry, Chair, so sorry. So sorry. To both of you. If you wish to speak, but as I say, don't feel obliged if you do not wish to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity, and I believe, given the conversations we've had to date, I think it's better that we move straight to the debate. But I reserve my wish to come back to that.
Right, so we have a list. The first to speak is Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. Is my time started yet, or do we?
This is not preferential treatment,
I'm
I
not
assure
quite sure
you.
what
You're
you're-
just first there.
What you're doing? I don't know. I'm confused. What's happening at the moment, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I have invited you to speak, and I'm expecting you to start.
Thank you. Right. Mr. Mayor, I said at the outset of this process, and goodness knows I think I've never been quoted quite so frequently subsequently, that what I wanted was an open and transparent investigation of what had happened, with nothing swept under the carpet. And I stand by those comments. I think it is very important that we do learn all the lessons that are to be gained so that we can adapt and improve the way that we work for a better service for our residents. What I perhaps ought to have added to open and transparent was fair and just. But what I didn't talk about at all was looking for blame. There's something rather nasty and repellent about the blame culture that we seem to have to live in these days. Name, blame, shame. There's such a whiff of sanctimonious self-righteousness about it. That we're okay and you're not okay. And I think we can hear some of it now. This has got much more to do with self-justification and revenge, and very little to do with improving what we're trying to do. I mean, that's not to excuse wrongdoing. But wrongdoing is not the same as making an honest mistake, in the same way that unlawful does not mean illegal. There's subtle differences, maybe rather too subtle for some, but they're very important nonetheless. If there has been wrongdoing, there are well-established routes to deal with it, either through our own standards arrangements or through the law, and these should be used if appropriate. What we don't want is trial by accusation and innuendo on fishing trips without any evidence. And the report finds no evidence of wrongdoing. What it does find are points for improvement,
and I fully endorse the recommendation that these should be accepted. Where I struggle is with the need for further legal advice. Fascinating though it might be to obtain a view, what are we going to do with the information when we get it? The questions outstanding are so because the lawyer saw no point in answering them, either because time had moved on or because they weren't relevant to the objectives of the review. They might have a lot to do with finger-pointing and apportioning blame, but precious little to do with enlightenment and better government for our residents. And what do we do if the legal opinions differ? Are we going to go for a third one? Best of 3, best of 5? Or are we just going to pick and choose the bits that best coincide with our own preconceptions? I cannot support a proposal to spend yet more public money with no budget allocated, no cap in place, no process identified, no definition of responsibility, and above all, no identified objective or outcome. That's just rank bad management. It's a want to misuse public funds. What is proposed is yet another shambles to heap on top of the shambles that already surrounds this report. Nor can I support the recommendation to give responsibility for deciding on future legal challenges to the committee that has presided over this shambles. ARGA knows what it is doing and should be allowed to get on with it, I said. Well, how wrong I was. ARGA has no executive authority and was never intended to have any, nor does it have any budget or budget responsibility for the costs which might be involved. In practical terms, it might well prove impossible to convene meetings in the necessary timescales to deal with legal matters. I have absolutely no objection to the concept of member involvement in the process in some way, but this needs to be thoroughly thought through, not summarily agreed in a knee-jerk reaction. Over recent months, discussion of this report has generated...
One more minute, Councillor.
Thank you. Such a rancid atmosphere in this chamber and elsewhere that our sense of purpose has almost been lost. We now have members and officers who are scared to make any decision or take any risks in case they are personally pilloried in council, in committee, or in the press for doing so. The scars are going to take some time to heal, but we have to draw a line and move on, or we will see the standards of our local government being dragged down. That is not serving our residents. It's being self-indulgent at residents' expense. Yes, mistakes were made. I've always accepted that. We must understand why and learn from them. But instead of recrimination and retribution, why at the start of the new year don't we try instead a little generosity of spirit and a little forgiveness? Let's try and look forward positively and together for the benefit of our residents, rather than remain mired in insult, division, and the past. But please, let us not rush into ill-considered, uncontrolled actions which the amended recommendations in some cases propose.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is indeed time to move on, and I think the purpose of this substantive is, at the end of the day, to actually enable us to move forward. I felt that we had actually moved forward last time in arriving at this recommendation as it stands at the moment, but it now appears that we're at risk of having taken one step forward and about to take two back. The recommendation as it stands is, in effect, in my opinion, measured, proportionate, well considered, and well thought out. It's specific in terms of its scope, specific about the questions that have been raised, but by the admission of the legal advisor that we obtained, have not been answered. It's about openness, taking the opportunity to publish material that has previously been redacted. It's about moving forward with purpose, about having a timetable which enables us to progress further. It's also about actually thinking about our standing orders, and there can be little doubt, I think, about the weakness of some of our standing orders and the need for those to be considered. And it's about actually addressing important issues of predetermination, declarations of interest, advice received, and which members of the public do not feel have been answered. It's not just a case that it's members in the chamber here that feel there are answered questions. There are significant members of the general public who we heard from at the beginning of this rearranged meeting who share the same view and are frankly perplexed and disturbed about the incompleteness of the evidence that we have before us so far. And actually, members opposite have referred to standards processes and, in a sense, bizarrely, somewhat made a suggestion that, perhaps people ought to, embark on those kind of processes. But from my point of view, what is important in the first instance is to ensure that we have all of the evidence and information that is needed before we embark on anything like that. And it may be that when that evidence is properly assembled in a complete way, that members are then satisfied and the general public are then satisfied that questions have been answered and there is no need to progress forward. So I really urge on members, it's not about vengeance, it's not about recrimination, it is actually about building on the progress that I think we made in putting this substantive on the table last time round and actually moving forward, because the terrible thing is, as has actually been already indicated earlier on, that if we fail to pass this now, we simply prolong the agony, we prolong the uncertainty, we prolong the situation of incomplete information, and we have little or no chance of moving forward. So I really urge on members of all parties to support this substantive recommendation and enable us collectively to move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Next, Councillor Tilbury.
Been a long time, hasn't it? Yeah, I mean, we've looked at this. We know this report is incomplete because, as people have said, the legal advice is suspect. It doesn't answer all the questions, and we know the advice is suspect because we saw at the beginning of this last meeting. We only have to look at the section relating to the declarations of interest. The barrister confidently declared that he can see no obvious reason why Councillor Finney was conflicted and should have declared his interest in the golf club. Yet even Councillor Finney now accepts that this is incorrect. I mean, he actually apologised at the last meeting. So that clearly contradicts what's in there. And a member of the public rather pertinently made that point at the beginning. Although I say apparently, as in the Gazette, he attempts to argue it was not a financial or pecuniary interest, when clearly it is, because any prejudicial interest has to be financial or it has to be regulatory, and it clearly isn't regulatory. I mean, it could be worse. It's actually, a criminal offence. So I think some people have done quite well out of this. It was quite lucky Councillor James dobbed him in when she did. But the point is, we need to get to the bottom of this. We have contradictory information here in this report. We have questions the barrister refused to answer, others he didn't know how to answer, and clearly, I mean, I spent 2 years on the Standards Committee. It was fairly obvious. It would have taken 5 seconds for anyone looking at it to say, sorry, you've got a conflict of interest, and you should look at that. And that's not a question of judgment, it's a question of common sense. And that's just one of many. I'm not going to go through the rest of this. We need to get to the bottom of this. I don't want to spend any more money on it. It should have been dealt with the money we spent on this, and we probably could have got the same report if we'd have spent the £12,000 that we were offered. So why we went down this road, I really don't know. But I think we've got to get to the end of it, and pretending that this will all go away if we forget it, it isn't going to happen. The public are just fed up with us. We lose respect from people. We've got to get to an end of this. Thank you.
Thank you for your brevity. Councillor Finney, you were named.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members opposite are saying that this is not a witch hunt and they're not looking to apportion blame, and yet I sit here, having been exonerated by the Ernst & Young report and by a standards inquiry in terms of my conduct in this. I've apologised as required. The difference between what Councillor Tilbury says, which was the declaration of interest, was the need to register it as an interest in the members' register, which was Even the standards agreed it did not have to be registered in the members' register of interests. But they did say that I should, and I accept, and I, before the decision made by standards, apologised to standards in my submission to standards and said that in hindsight I should have declared an interest at the meetings that were cited and withdrawn them from the meetings. I am not prepared to sit in this chamber and have my name dragged through the mud constantly on an unsubstantiated basis. And I hate to say this, but there is no privilege in this chamber, and the laws of libel apply to this chamber just as they do outside. Now, that's not a threat, but I'm not going to sit here ad infinitum and accept accusations that are continually made when I've fully submitted and taken part in the investigation, fully compliant. I attended the meetings, I complied fully with the investigation, and as I agree totally with the leader, that yes, there were mistakes made. I've apologised for my part in that. But I'm not prepared to sit here quietly and constantly have my name repeated when I have been through the due process of the constitution of this council.
Councillor Tilbury. I think, no, I won't comment. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little bit concerned at some of the words coming over from the other side of the chamber that suggest there's a witch hunt, we're looking for blood, etc. I can say from my own personal view that has never been my objective. Some of us are looking to clear names. People who have dedicated a lot of time to this council as officers and as councillors have dedicated a lot of time, a lot of effort and a lot of energy doing what they believe was right. It may have been wrong, but I'm looking to clear their names. I'm not bothered about paying a small amount of money to clear those whose reputations hang in the balance. There's suggestions going on out there that they behave badly and improperly, and until they're cleared, they can't walk with their heads held high. So I'm supporting the amendment because I think it's absolutely important that we clear these names, and I'm a bit concerned I seem to have more confidence in the Conservative councillors than the Conservative group leader. In terms of the actual the recommendations itself, I have an issue with one of the bullet points. I'll quickly say it's that recommends a revision of council standing orders to ensure the involvement of ARGA in the authorisation of significant legal proceedings. The issues I have is I'm not sure what significant is, and the other thing, I don't know what the involvement of ARGA is. Does that mean the entire ARGA will meet? Does that mean an email from the chairman? Does it mean an open meeting, a public meeting or a private meeting? And if we have to respond to a legal thing within 14 days, will ARGA meet and what happens during the election? So that seems to be an incomplete bullet point. So when you take the vote, could you please allow us to vote on the bullet points individually so that I can vote accordingly? Thank you.
Your request is noted. The next speaker is Mrs. Cubitt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to, I mean, we've rehearsed all of this already, but it's just in response to the leader's statements, which I think were disingenuous in many respects. Firstly, he said the report is finished. It is not finished. It is an unfinished work. The lawyer has not answered 75% of the questions that he was instructed to answer by our legal department. So when you say that, Mayor, when the leader says that the report is finished, it is not finished. The legal matters have not been answered, and it is dishonest to suggest that they have been. That's the first matter I want to say. The second matter in relation to that.
Yes, you may.
Simply that I actually never said the report was finished.
Councillor Kubic, continue.
Well, I'm slightly gobsmacked because the leader very definitely implied that the legal matters. No.
Please allow the speaker to speak. Thank you.
Okay, I'm quite sure if we go back on the web, we'll hear that the leader said that the report must be considered to be finished because he doesn't want any more money spent on it. He thinks it would be a shocking waste of funds for any further matters to be dealt with on that. So it therefore implies that he believes that the report is finished. If he doesn't think it's finished, why does he not think it's necessary to spend the further funds required to finish the report? That's a point. Anyway, the second issue is in relation to the legal opinion. Many members of the public have been to various meetings, many members of this council have been to meetings, and have very explicitly stated that they are not seeking an alternative legal opinion, they are seeking a legal opinion because, as I repeat, 75% of the instruction to council is incomplete, unfinished, right? Second point, he said, and I quote verbatim, a wanton misuse of funds. Well, I believe, and many of my residents believe, that it is a wanton misuse of funds to undertake a report which costs £100,000 and not have the outcome that the report was intended to achieve. And we know that there's going to be a meeting at some stage to discover why the process went horribly awry. It is extraordinary that when the pitch was made by Ernst & Young in March, it couldn't have been more explicit as to how they were going to do this report. And somebody, somewhere, and certainly not Arga, agreed to a complete change in that in that report at some stage, and it resulted in them being able to charge an amount without achieving what they had been instructed to achieve. So I believe it's a wanton misuse to have a report which is unfinished, and the analogy I used at the last meeting was the bridge which doesn't get to the other side of the river. So when the leader refers to wanton misuse, I think he needs to analyse his own navel. Right. Thirdly, he refers to rushed jobs. Well, can I please advise the leader that if he is unclear as to how we got to this situation in the first place, and it was unconnected to me, the Economic Prosperity Scrutiny Committee in November 2011, not 2012, 2011, that makes it, in my calculation, over a year ago, asked for an independent governance audit. If you consider that to be a rush job, well, I'm in a state of shock.
Can you rush a little, Councillor Cubitt? 1 more minute to go.
That's all I'd like to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I do have to say there's a lot of sort of sub-meetings going on around the room on all sides, and I'd be grateful if there were less of it so that we can hear what the speakers are saying uninterrupted. Yeah. The next speaker is Councillor Mitchell.
I hadn't entirely nodded off, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. When the original proposal for the Ernst & Young work came to Arga, having looked carefully at the proposals, I suggested in the committee that the committee took some time, which could have been done on that night, to look at the proposed work plan in a little more detail. Having a background in both commissioning and proposing this kind of urgent and short-term project, I had detected some weaknesses in what was proposed, and I didn't believe that the work as stated would fully meet the need. Unfortunately, those who are so keen to get all of the answers on this, are you going to allow interjections, Mr. Mayor?
Well, but I don't think you were named, if that's what you're saying. No,
I believe Councillor Mitchell was in the audit when it all happened.
Councillor Cubitt, that is not a proper interruption. Mitchell, please continue.
Well, I just suggest if members think that I have knowledge of being at meetings I wasn't at, they consult the webcast, because I've looked at the webcast and there's every evidence that I was there. Anyway, I had doubts about and actually I made the same point in the previous council meeting, and it wasn't challenged then. Suddenly somebody's discovered that I wasn't there, very strange. I suggested we take a little time to look more carefully at the work plan. This was shouted down because those members who were so keen to get the thing done wanted to simply get on with it. Let's get on with it. Don't worry about the detail. Let's get on with it. Let's spend the money and do it. Turns out I was right. It didn't fully meet the need. And therefore we spend more money. Partly because it didn't meet the need, but that wasn't really to do with it. I think it was to do with the fact that it didn't produce the answers that some people wanted to have. So we spend some more money, and still we don't get the answers they want to have. And then we had the strange thing at most recent ARGA meeting of a member of the public, supported by a member of the council, or sitting with a member of the council, who said much the same thing, urging that ARGA institute yet another investigation into something which, when somebody actually looked into it afterwards, wasn't on the agenda, so it shouldn't have been raised anyway. When they looked into it afterwards, and by the way, naming names, as usual, it turned out to be based on a completely spurious newspaper report. And people say there's no witch hunt. Well, it's very strange. If it looks like a witch hunt and feels like a witch hunt, I suspect it is a witch hunt. However, coming to this particular piece of paper we have this evening, I find it very odd, and I'm assured by colleagues that it's perfectly legitimate. This appears to be going into the record as if it were a recommendation of the committee. It says here, independent governance audit, Ernst & Young recommended, point 6.1. 6.1 refers to the committee papers. That wasn't what the committee recommended, so it seems odd to me that this enters the record in that way, and I just ask that somebody looks at that to make sure that the record isn't messed about with and that the original committee report says what it says, and that this somehow, when it enters the minutes of this meeting, makes it clear that this is not the recommendation of that committee. It hasn't been discussed, changes to it haven't been discussed in that committee yet. But the other thing which I'm concerned about here is that yet again we have something which in very simple terms says the following is to be done. In this case, something is to be answered by an independent law expert with immediate effect and be brought back to the ARGA committee. Who commissions that work? Who reviews whether that commission of that work is going to fully answer the questions, that there's no ducking and weaving, that the lawyer doesn't have any reason to come back and say, I wasn't briefed on that, or anything like that? If we go down that track...
One more minute, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I'm nearly finished. If we go down that track without somebody seriously sitting and looking at it, because the council makes this decision on the fly, we're in the same box as we were. And the other thing which I agree with the member who spoke earlier, on the final bullet point on this page, the council recommends the revision of standing orders to ensure. Well, the council can recommend whatever it likes, but it's up to the committee to come back to the council with recommendations. The council should surely ask the committee to investigate that, rather than telling the committee what it is to report. I do think, however, Mr. Mayor, that we run the risk of making this council look absolutely ridiculous because of the way in which people are simply banging on, seeking, failing to get the answers they would like to have had in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Yes, good, good. I hope others will note that one. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a fascinating debate, isn't it? It's a fascinating job of obfuscation going on from some sides of this chamber, really. When you think about the issues at stake, I mean, we're going to have a scrutiny into the process of what happened in the investigation. We're going to have a scrutiny into all of that. ARGA's agreed to that. So that whole process issue can get put to one side because it's the substantive that we should be debating this evening. It's the substantive of what job remains unfinished in relation to the investigation and the intent of members seeking to set up the independent inquiry in the first place. And every obstacle at every stage, twisted and turned from every quarter, well, from certain quarters, shall I put it like that, to stop it, basically, to interfere with it, to create obstacles that have left us to where we are tonight. Bottom line, two words: probity and integrity. Unless we satisfy the integrity of the investigation itself and the integrity of members themselves, and to quote Councillor Gurdon from the ARGA meeting, we are all tainted by this, and unless we clean up our act and clean this up, simply standing up in the council and apologising isn't good enough, particularly if you then carry on in the cabinet, taking the taxpayers' money with your allowance, particularly when it was you did breach the code of conduct. you did have a prejudicial interest. It's not about a witch hunt. It's not about that. It's about responsibility. And there's something I want to refer us to, Chair, that may help us, Mr. Mayor, in the debate. And those are the Nolan principles. The Nolan principles of public office. What is written at the top of our code of conduct. Number 1, selflessness. That holders of public office should act solely in terms of the public interest. They should not do so in order to gain financial or other benefits for themselves, their family, or their friends. Let's hold that particular value because I think it's important. And then the last 2, talk about honesty and openness and accountability, it's all in there. But honesty. Holders of public office have a duty to declare any private interest relating to their public duties and to take steps to resolve any conflicts arising in a way that protects the public interest. And finally, leadership. That holders of public office should promote and support these Nolan principles in leadership and by example. Well, we have had no example from any Conservative member at all on the issues raised in the Ernst & Young report. No example of leadership. I actually got that from learntobealeader.com. I thought that was rather funny, really, thinking about the context of leadership in this chamber at times. From opposite in the administration. Unless we solve these issues and deal with them, Mr. Mayor, they will continue to fester. This isn't going to go away. This isn't just going to disappear. There are things that happened. A High Court found this council and the Cabinet and those members of the Cabinet who were in it that voted the way they did to have acted unlawfully. You don't just wish that away. You don't just wish away your role and responsibility in public office by doing all that has been done by the Conservative group so far on this entire issue. You don't wipe it under the carpet and try and stop the process, as is being argued this evening, when the inquiry actually isn't finished yet. It's not complete. Webster got it wrong. Webster's views were so wrong, he was advising the committee in Arga, you don't have a worry on declarations of interest, and you don't have a problem with conflicts of interest at all. We then have a standards process that delivers a verdict that, yes, there was a breach of the code of conduct. A legal view has no part to play in that context in the standards process. The matters of public law relate to predetermination, conflict of interest, the use of monies, the role that members played in decision making and the good governance of this authority. They are key questions. If we can't resolve the issues raised on the good governance of this authority through proper investigation and public law answers that actually answer the question, don't forget Webster was instructed and wasn't instructed properly because he came back and said, you've not instructed me to answer the questions. So I'm not answering the questions, and he didn't. So either we finish this and do it properly with whatever is left in the budget it doesn't need to be expensive at all. There doesn't need to be there were a variety of quotes that were given for the whole process. And it wasn't the members that chose Ernst & Young. I'll remind us all of that. No member chose Ernst & Young. That all aside, putting all of that aside, the only thing that matters is the integrity of this chamber. And until the Tories get it through their head that they have to take some responsibility for what they've done and deal with the process fully and properly, and hands up, but deal with the process fully and properly, and accept what goes with that in public office as per the Nolan principles, this is going to run and run and run, and it will not go away. And nor should it, because we're not adhering to our own code of conduct.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I was elected first to this council in the year 2000, I was proud to be elected and proud to represent the people that elected me. And when I experienced the management and the staff of this council, I realized that we had very, very high caliber staff working for us and with us. And I was proud through all those years until in the autumn of 2011, when we were told that the council who owned the land had decided not to develop. Now, that was the first time we had ever been officially, properly, and upfront told that. And it was at that point that I realized there was shenanigans going on and people were exercising judgments not in favor of the people of Basingstoke. This particular motion is made up of 2 parts. The first part, the first 3 paragraphs, is the issues arising immediately and directly from the report, from the Ernst & Young report. Nobody has spoken against those recommendations. Nobody. The second part of this motion was discussed and agreed. At the latter end of the adjourned meeting. So nobody has spoken against the first part, and the second part was actually agreed at the latter end of the last meeting. The only reason we're discussing it now, in substance, is because of your ruling, Mr. Mayor. Your ruling says that we must discuss and agree again that which we agreed last time. Now, I disagree with that, Mr. Mayor, but I respect your right to make the decision. However, there is absolutely no doubt that this council continues to look ridiculous. At the very last meeting of this council, just before Christmas, the cabinet sat there, and when members of the public asked cogent, coherent questions, they got total disregard. Total disregard. They were told, you can come along and ask any question you like, we have no obligation to answer them. Now, in all honesty, we're here to serve them, not to tell them. The second issue that is critical is that the report from Ernst & Young reduced the whole thing in debate terms to whether or not the legal advice was solid and sound. And it was not solid and sound because it actually says, I'm not answering questions because Ernst & Young hasn't got the right to ask me, and I'm choosing not to answer them. Now, there's nothing sanctimonious about trying to put right the wrongs that this council has led to where we are today. There's nothing sanctimonious about that. Neither is there any sanctimonious nature to the issue of saying, let's get a proper investigation. I've said to a number of people, some of them in this room tonight, we're not looking for scalps for the sake of it. And we're not. We are looking for a proper, in-depth investigation with effective recommendations. And if you vote against this tonight, you'll be voting for, let's hide it.
One moment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's hide the issues. Let's cover up. Let's not answer the public's questions. And that's the wrong thing to do. So I urge you, think carefully. You've spent 5 years going wrong. You've spent 5 years ending up in the High Court. Let's not go there again. Let's get this right. Let's do it properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I urge members here tonight to support the substantive motion. It doesn't come as any surprise. Much has been said, and I don't want to add to very much that has been said more eloquently than I can say it. But one thing I do want to comment on, if I may, I was genuinely surprised at the leader of the council's comments about the role of ARGA in all of this. And if I was Councillor Sherrill, I'd be very offended by the points that he made, particularly as they put her in the firing line at the last meeting to answer the questions from the public, which I thought was quite outrageous. Neither the leader nor the cabinet had the courage to stand up and answer those questions, which I thought was quite outrageous. But she was good enough to do it on the night. And now to undermine the role of ARGA and her in particular as the chair of that committee, I think is unacceptable. I have every confidence in ARGA. I thought they did a very difficult job in very difficult circumstances, and lots of things, let me say, were happening behind the scenes while they were doing their best actually to work with Ernst & Young on this matter. I won't go into those this evening, but that was the truth of it at the time. Another thing that the leader has said tonight, really, in terms of his commentary about the role of William Webster in regard to him saying something akin to, he saw no point in answering the questions. He didn't say that. I know reference has been made to this already. But what he said, I think, and he certainly turns out to be no expert in public law, let me say, so goodness knows why he was appointed in the first place anyway. But what he actually said was, my instructing solicitors are the council, and I'm not prepared to answer questions that are put to me by Ernst & Young, which is quite frankly outrageous again, I think, in the position that we found ourselves. So 4 key areas relating to public law, which relate in many areas to predetermination, etc., were just not answered. And by definition, this is an incomplete report, and it needs to be completed. I made also reference at the last meeting to the fact that I take the view that this extra, if that's what it's going to be described as, legal work need not cost very much money. And I hold to that view. I know Councillor Akers challenged me at the last meeting, but based on the estimates that we had originally, there is absolutely no reason why this amount of additional work should cost the council very much money. And quite frankly, if it is on top of the £100,000, then it's well worth spending. Or as Councillor Tilbury says, it ought to be contained within that original limit in the first place, because many of the tasks that were commissioned under that £100,000 have not been completed. And if we had any bottle on this, we'd be saying to Ernst & Young and others, we are not going to pay you because you haven't done the job that we asked you to do. So this should be overcome in a number of ways. The other point that I make, and I do say it genuinely now in terms of what I think Councillor Shaw said, if you actually reflect on where we were some weeks ago, and when we had a substantial debate akin to what we're having tonight, we ended up with, I think, a developing consensus, believe it or not, although people might smile at that word tonight. But we were almost there. Had we not, with your ruling, Mr. Mayor, obviously left the chamber at the time we did, I think we would have completed, obviously we would have completed the discussion there and then, and people were moving to one mind, and we had a number of abstentions on the night, which were understandable. And I hope tonight people will reflect on that, councillors will reflect on it, and we will get to a satisfactory position where the substantive motion is supported. If you take Councillor Gavin James' point, you'll go through this bullet point by bullet point. I understand his reservations about the role of ARG, and I think that can be clarified, but I recommend obviously to Council that this substantive motion is supported in the form we see it before us.
Thank you, Councillor. I have one more speaker, Councillor Gardiner, and I will then be inviting Councillor Sherritt to sum up if she so wishes.
Most of the recommendation I would agree with. However, there are 2 areas that I don't agree with. If we go through the items I agree with first, bullet point 1 has already been done. Bullet point 2, I think we all agree. We're pretty unanimous on that. We were not unanimous on bullet point 3, but it's certainly one that I would support. Many Down land is a very important asset to this council, and it is important that it is properly disclosed and reported in the accounts. Wouldn't argue with that at all. First 3 paragraphs, we all agree. I don't agree about further legal advice. Ernst & Young asked, through us, various questions of the lawyer. They were happy with the lawyer that was appointed. Yes, he has got specialities outside of public law. That doesn't mean that he's not qualified to answer questions on public law. Nobody has said categorically that he's not qualified. It's been implied, but it's not been said. So, at the moment, Ernst & Young was satisfied with the answers that they got in completing their report. As far as they're concerned, that report is complete. The legal opinions were not part of that report, they were attached to it. And I agree, not all those questions have been answered. But Ernst & Young were of an opinion that they didn't matter when it came to reaching the conclusions that they did in their report. I agree with them. I don't think there's any benefit in going further forward at this time and spending more money. Lastly, the final bullet point, I agree with what's been said before. Yes, there should be more involvement in going ahead with significant legal proceedings than there has been in the past. I'm not sure that ARGA is the right place for it. I don't think the full committee is necessarily the place for it, and so I'm not happy about that last bullet point as it stands. So I would also agree that we should go through it almost paragraph by paragraph, not just bullet point by bullet point, so that we can agree those items on which we are all agreed and go forward, and we can debate and vote as we feel fit on the items on which we do not agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cherrett.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to sum up. I shall be very brief because I think throughout not just this evening listening, but the many hours that members of ARGA have sat through the committee and tried to deal with this matter to date, I have done my best to try and play a balanced hand through this process. And having listened to the comments tonight, many of which are not new, the only one thing that I can feel absolutely wholehearted in support of is we try and bring this matter to a close. That's why I'm keen that we actually now vote on it and would support the idea that we vote paragraph by paragraph. That's at your discretion, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, we can. You've asked for it, so we can. If you're in agreement, then I'd like to start with a show of hands, and if it's overwhelming, but if you feel that you need to have a recorded vote on every separate... yes, okay. Let me start by saying I am intending to do as requested. I'm not taking it paragraph by paragraph. I'm deeming, because we'll have to come back to have a, if you like, a vote on the substantive motion with the bits in and out that we've choose to put in and out. So I'm taking the first 3 paragraphs as being just sort of introduction that we previously agreed. So the separate votes will start with this council resolves, and then the individual bullet points, and then the complete thing as we've agreed. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, just a... Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor? I just wanted to be helpful. I think actually the first 2 paragraphs we might take, but I do think we actually haven't voted substantively on paragraph 3, that we accept in full the the report, the recommendation of the report.
I believe, I don't think it's worth debating further. I'll take it separately, but I believed it was part of the original recommendation and therefore carried over and therefore been in essence accepted because there wasn't any debate about that in itself. But we'll leave that where it is. I'm therefore moving to a vote, and at the moment it looks as though we're going to have to do it as a recorded vote, so I hope we've got all our pencils sharpened on the 3rd paragraph, which is, it is therefore proposed. Everybody clear what we're voting on? Just that paragraph. Sorry, just one moment, please. So, just to clarify, because as I've managed to confuse the Chief Executive, I might have confused others. Right. I am proposing to take separate votes on the individual items and then come back and have whatever has survived those individual votes together with the 2 introductory paragraphs as a consolidated vote, if you like, treating the individual bullets as amendments in a sort of way, so that we have a consolidated... Okay, right, you don't wish to do it that way. We'll do the first two paragraphs, and then we'll do the 3rd paragraph and so on, and then we'll finish up with the complete thing. Yes? I don't believe we need a recorded vote on the first 2 paragraphs. Can I have a show of hand in favour of the first 2 paragraphs, please? Oh, sorry.
Having asked for a recorded vote, I think I'm entitled to insist on one. But, however, if you now ask for a show of hands on whether we should have a recorded vote on the first two paragraphs, you're undermining the principle.
Since everybody is not going to agree on which order, I'm going to take it from first principles. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take the first two paragraphs. Hopefully we don't need to separate those. I'm going to take a recorded vote on the first two paragraphs, then the third paragraph, and then the bullet points. It's a terribly long-winded way.
It's really important, this, because
Please respect the councillors' comments.
It's so funny because you hate people laughing at you, and yet you love laughing at other people. Right, and there's a saying about removing the plank from thine own eye before trying to remove the mote from mine.
Can I speak to the point?
Okay, just in the meeting that we had on the 13th of December, there was a proposal, and this third paragraph, which people are referring to, actually, completely, I believe, renders the entire motion nonsensical. And I think that we as members really need either the solicitor or the chief executive or the mayor to explain to us what the third paragraph means. Because the third paragraph was at the end of the first 6.1, and the third paragraph was not in 6.2, and it countermands. A lawyer, if they looked at it now, will say that it negates the rest of the motion.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The thing might be a nonsense, but we have...
Sorry, it negates the whole thing, and someone's been very clever, I think.
I think we have spent an hour debating it, and I don't think we can commence a new debate on that paragraph. I'm very sorry. It's there the way it is, through the either expertise or incompetence of the various people who put it together. So can we have some order, please? I am moving to a recorded vote on the first two paragraphs. Please, those in favour, please, well, not those in favour, the Chief Executive is going to read out the names now.
Mr. Mayor, a recorded vote then on the first two paragraphs on the white sheet. For, against or abstain, Councillor Mrs Baker. Thank you. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Miss Bean. Councillor Bierman. Councillor Bound. Councillor Mrs Burgess. Councillor Miss Cherrett. Councillor Mrs Court. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Mrs Cubitt. Councillor Day. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Dunlop. Councillor Miss Eachus. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Finney. Councillor Mrs Frankham. Councillor Frankham. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Goddison. Councillor Golding. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Isaac. Councillor Ms James. Councillor James. Councillor Joe Wardner. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keating. Councillor Leake. Councillor Marks. Councillor Miller. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Musson. Councillor Mrs Ossleton. Councillor Parker. Councillor Peach. Councillor Potter. Councillor Putty. Councillor Reagan. Councillor Mrs Reid. Councillor Round. Councillor Raphael. Councillor Sanders. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Mrs Still. Councillor Taylor. Sorry, Councillor Taylor. Thank you. Councillor Tilbury. Councillor Tomlin. Councillor Mrs Tucker. Councillor Miss Washbourne. Councillor Gary Watts. Councillor Keith Watts. Councillor West. Councillor Mrs Waldridge. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, 438 against 13 and 6 abstentions. So that's carried.
Thank you. We're now moving to paragraph 3, and same procedure again.
So, Mr. Mayor, this is just paragraph 3. Councillor Mrs. Baker. Councillor Barnes. Sorry. Against. Thank you. Councillor Miss Bean. Councillor Bierman.
Abstain.
Councillor Bound. Councillor Mrs. Burgess. Councillor Miss Cherrett. Councillor Mrs. Court. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Mrs. Cubitt. Councillor Day. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Dunlop. Councillor Miss Eachus. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Finney. Councillor Mrs. Frankham. Councillor Frankham. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gosden. Councillor Golding. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Isaac. Councillor Miss James. Councillor James. Councillor Joe Wardner. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keating. Councillor Leake. Councillor Marks. Councillor Miller. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Musson. Councillor Mrs. Ossleton. Councillor Parker. Councillor Peach. Councillor Potter. Councillor Putty. Councillor Regan. Councillor Mrs. Reid. Councillor Round. Councillor Raphael. Councillor Sanders. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Mrs. Still. Councillor Mrs. Taylor is absent. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Tilbury. Councillor Tomlin. Councillor Mrs. Tucker. Councillor Ms. Washbourne. Councillor Gary Watts. Councillor Keith Watts. Councillor West. Councillor Mrs. Wardridge. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Order, please.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, 422 against 29, 6 abstentions. So that's lost.
Thank you. So we now move to paragraph 4.
Mr. Mayor, we're now at a recorded vote on paragraph 4, which starts with this council resolves that the questions asked, etc. So, for, against, abstentions. Councillor Mrs Baker. Thank you. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Miss Bean. Councillor Bierman. Councillor Bound. Councillor Mrs Burgess. Councillor Miss Cherrett. Councillor Mrs Court. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Mrs Cubitt. Councillor Day. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Dunlop. Councillor Masichus. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Finney. Councillor Mrs Frankham. Councillor Frankham. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Goddison. Councillor Golding. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Isaac. Councillor Miss James. Councillor James. Councillor Joe Ordner. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keating. Councillor Leake. Councillor Marks. Councillor Miller. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Musson. Councillor Mrs Ossleton. Councillor Parker. Councillor Peach. Councillor Potter. Councillor Putty. Councillor Regan. Councillor Mrs Reid. Councillor Round. Councillor Raffel. Councillor Sanders. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Mrs Still. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Tilbury. Councillor Tomlin. Councillor Mrs Tucker. Councillor Miss Washbourne. Councillor Gary Watts. Councillor Keith Watts. Councillor West. Councillor Mrs Waldridge. Thank you.
Whilst the Chief Executive's counting those up, can I ask of the requester of a recorded vote whether we can forego it on the next or the first bullet point? Thank you, sir. In fact, I think whilst the Chief Executive's adding up that last bit, I don't think it confuses the issue too much. I intend to move to a vote on the first bullet point alone, yes? So those in favour of bullet point 1, please show. All right, those against? Right. It's a good job, isn't it? Otherwise we'd have to do a bit of time travelling. The next vote will be on bullet point 2 alone, when the Chief Executive's finished doing his sums.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm there. Sorry. First time we've disagreed. It's 433 against 18 and abstention 6. 433 against 18, abstention 6.
Right, well, it's back to you now. We've done the first bullet point. So this is now a recorded vote on second bullet point starting resolves to act.
Councillor Miss Baker. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Miss Bean. Councillor Bierman. Councillor Bound. Councillor Mrs Burgess. Councillor Miss Cherrett. Councillor Mrs Court. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Mrs Cubitt. Councillor Day. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Dunlop. Councillor Masichus. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Finney. Councillor Mrs Frankham. Councillor Frankham. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gollison. Councillor Golding. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Isaac. Councillor Miss James. Councillor James. Councillor Joe Ordner. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keating. Councillor Leake. Councillor Marks, Councillor Miller, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Musson, Councillor Mrs Ossleton, Councillor Parker, Councillor Peach, Councillor Potter, Councillor Putty, Councillor Regan, Councillor Mrs Reid, Councillor Round, Councillor Raphael, Councillor Sanders, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Mrs Steele, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Tilbury, Councillor Tomlin, Councillor Mrs Tucker, Councillor Miss Washbourne, Councillor Gary Watts, Councillor Watts, Councillor West, Councillor Mrs Waldridge. Thank you. Mr Mayor, thank you. 452, against 1, abstentions 4.
That sounds as though it's carried. So we're now moving to the third bullet point, commencing intends to review. Off we go again.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Baker, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Miss Bean, Councillor Beerman, Councillor Bound, Councillor Mrs Burgess, Councillor Miss Cherrett, Councillor Mrs Court, Councillor Cousins, Councillor Mrs Cubitt, Councillor Day, Councillor Donnell, Councillor Dunlop, Councillor Miss Eachus, Councillor Eyre, Councillor Finney, Councillor Mrs Frankham, Councillor Frankham, Councillor Gardner, Councillor Goddison, Councillor Golding, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Hood, Councillor Hussey, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Ms James, Councillor James, Councillor J. Wardner, Councillor Jones, Councillor Keating, Councillor Leake, Councillor Marks, Councillor Miller, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Musson, Councillor Mrs Ossleton, Councillor Parker, Councillor Peach, Councillor Potter, Councillor Putty, Councillor Regan, Councillor Mrs Reid, Councillor Round, Councillor Raphael, Councillor Sanders, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Mrs Steele, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Tilbury, Councillor Tomlin, Councillor Mrs Tucker, Councillor Miss Washbourne, Councillor Gary Watts, Councillor Keith Watts, Councillor West, Councillor Mrs Wardridge. Mr Mayor, I hazard a guess that's 52 4 and 5 abstentions.
I think it's clearly carried one way or another, so it will be recorded. So that takes us to the last bullet point. Sure.
52 4, 5 abstentions. Yeah. This is a point of personal explanation. It was suggested that sounded like a Reading score. As members know, I'm a Reading season ticket holder. It would have been 5-4, 52 against the way Reading are playing.
Yes, I allowed it. So, last bullet point, which is which commends. Pardon? No, forget it. I think. Bullet recommends the revision of. You are allowed to catch your breath.
Apologies, thank you. 4, Councillor Franken 4. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gosden. Councillor Golding. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Isaac. Councillor Ms James. Councillor James. Councillor Joe Ordner. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keating. Councillor Leake. Councillor Marks. Councillor Miller. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Musson. Councillor Mrs Ossleton. Councillor Parker. Councillor Peach. Councillor Potter. Councillor Putty. Councillor Regan. Councillor Mrs Reid. Councillor Round. Councillor Raffel. Councillor Sanders. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Mrs Still. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Tilbury. Councillor Tomlin. Councillor Mrs Tucker. Councillor Miss Washbourne. Councillor Gary Watts. Councillor Keith Watts. Councillor West. Councillor Mrs Wardridge. Thank you. Thank you.
Obviously, this counting process is a bit soporific. I hope the next bit will wake everybody up. Very good motion coming forward for debate. So, pardon? Question of opinion, yeah. No, it's a good topic to be debating.
16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Thank you, Mr Mayor. For 21, against 29, 7 abstentions. Thank you.
Right, well, if I've got it right, and I'm sure the Chief Executive will correct me if I haven't, I take that to result in paragraph 3 being removed and the last bullet point being removed, and all the others were approved. Anybody challenging that? No? Good. Wow. Oh. It does happen occasionally by chance. Right, okay, well, happily we can move on to another topic, and I refer you back to the main agenda, and we're now page 5, item 13. We have a motion moved by Councillor Hussey. Councillor Hussey, please. And please remember, colleagues, this is a time-limited debate now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in October, I went on site with one of our highway officers to assess what could be done for one of my residents. And the officer's recommendation was for a drop curb and a couple of metres of footpath. So I said, thank you very much, when going to have it done? He said, well, not for a while yet. He said, because the budget is all committed. This was in October, with 6 months of the year to go. He said I'd have to wait for next year's budget, assuming that we had one. The problem I have with this is that many residents who have impermeability have short life expectancies. Every month is precious. Every day is precious. When you're elderly, waiting for 6 months is a very, very long time. As the motion says, just 3 years ago, we had a budget of £20,000 for drop curbs, plus an additional £38,000 for footways. But over the years, that's been reduced, and today we've got just £9,000 to address these needs. Yet we have an ageing population. the problem isn't going to go away. It's not going to reduce. And another £11,000, it's not much in monetary terms, but if you're in need, £11,000 is very, very important. It's huge in helping those with these mobility issues. It helps them to stay independent. It helps them to stay in their own homes. I urge members to please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey. Second is Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief and really make the point that this is about joined-up thinking within the council and allocating resources sensibly, in the sense that if many members will be aware of the significant amounts of grant funding that the council gives for disabled adaptations within people's homes, and it's fairly common, I think, for the kind of adaptations that take place within a single dwelling, to be of this total order of magnitude, perhaps 20,000 assisting someone within their own home. And it seems entirely reasonable, therefore, in my opinion, for the council to, spend the sum of money that's indicated here in supporting disabled people's full human rights, not just within their own homes, but to be able to move around freely in the public realm, because that is absolutely essential to more fundamental issues of participation, access to services, and involvement in the community. And I really think that this is an issue both of practicality, of common sense, of consistency in terms of delivery of services by the council, and also of an opportunity for the council to show its commitment to the involvement of all residents in wider society. So, second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. I have Councillor Ossleton as the first speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's on. I think you all can hear me. Thank you, Councillor Hussey, for the motion. Just to put one or two things in perspective, up to 2010 and 11, the Borough Councillor supplemented Hampshire County Council's various access programmes by making available a pedestrian access initiative capital budget. This funded work to assist mobility for the disabled and include the provision of sections of missing footway and dropped curbs area, as well as dropped curbs for property-specific vehicular access. The sum allocated to then, and I think when you're talking about it, Councillor Hussey, it was 20910. It was actually 20,003 for the area wide, which is the bit that we just used for lowering pavement, etc. We spent 5,000, and on the property Pacific, which was for the disabled, was 14.6. So it wasn't actually 20 when we looked at it. It was 15,000. Then for 2011-12, the pedestrian access initiative budget was merged with the then parking in residential areas, who we heard about last time, at last council meeting, capital budget to form the parking and access capital heading. With the merging of the two budgets headings, it was agreed by the cabinet member that the access element of the new budget heading should focus on providing only property-specific vehicular access targeting at assisting mobility for disabled residents. And this was the decision notice number 44 in 2011. And any request for pedestrian dropped curbs will be referred to Hampshire County Council to deal with. So they actually deal with the dropped curbs. In 2012, 11-12, 12 properties specific access schemes were delivered using the available budget, which was then 6,000. To date, in 12-13, 10 schemes have been delivered at a cost of 7,500, and a further 2 have been ordered at an estimated cost of 1,500. The current year's budget, as you are correct, was 9,000 and therefore has been fully allocated. There are actually 10, I found, outstanding requests for pedestrian and vehicular dropped curbs. Of these, 2 are for the pedestrian drop curbs, and these have been referred to Hampshire County Council. The remaining 8 schemes will be considered for funding once the capital budget for parking and access has been confirmed by full council in 2013. But, Councillor Hussey, I will be recommending to Cabinet to use the preparation of the 2013-14 budget that we do increase the figure to 20,000 as it was before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oselton. Councillor Jane Frankham.
Thank you. First, I'll have to declare, as a registered disabled person, I've got a particular interest. But my interest is not so much
I'm sorry, I think I heard a remark along the lines of no, or something like that. And if that was the case, that's totally inappropriate. Totally inappropriate. I don't know where it came from.
I didn't hear.
Well, I heard it, and I think that's totally inappropriate.
Right. I still didn't hear what I said. So, right, basically, what I want to bring forward is the part in the motion where it says about and small stretches of short stretches of footpaths. I've been in touch with officers because I've got such a case as that, and the officers had to say, I regret we no longer have a capital budget for missing footpaths. I've to and froed on emails, and the officer himself has said he would love to do this. This is an appropriate request, but he can't. So I would ask the Cabinet member to please have a look. The stretch I'm talking about is from Specklewood Road through to Trinidad and Tobago. It's just a stretch of mud that disabled people can't use. You can't go in your buggy.
Councillor Frankham,
anybody
would you address
walking
the
you
chair,
can't
please?
use. Sorry?
Please address the chair.
Talk through Martin, in other words.
Oh, sorry.
To run out of their hearing aid, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm going to take these out because I'm having a lot of problems. I'm unwell, but still drag myself out to come to the meeting, so I am a little bit lightheaded. So I do apologise. Basically, I'll go back to what I'm saying. This particular stretch, Mr. Mayor, people can't use, and I've been told we can't do this path. The estimate cost of it is £6,000 to make a safe passage for people to go to school, to go to the play area, and I just think it's appalling that we haven't got enough budget to be able to do this, and that this has been cut. I know that we've got to cut things, but people's safety surely is more paramount. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frankham. Councillor Miller. Councillor Jane Frankham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but my question has been answered.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. That's the briefest tonight. Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking in favour of the motion and the portfolio holders conceding the 20,000. I'd like to first off declare an interest. I am disabled and I'm in receipt of disability living allowance money in the true spirit of disclosure that we're doing at the moment. I mean, to hear the Tories and Liberals speaking about the disabled and giving extra money, a little 20 grand, makes me feel sick, really. The sheer hypocrisy of it, because this coalition government have chose the demonised and picked on disabled to actually cut the deficit. The weakest in society. The Liberals in coalition and the Tories have gladly enacted the Tory policy of cutting disability benefits and forcing disabled people onto lower benefits to get jobs that do not exist. They're forced through the indignity, and it's carrying on, they've been stepped up this year through the indignity of going in front of Atos, a company who proved to be messing up everything they do. And the only issue there is to get people off of onto lower benefits and onto jobs that say don't exist. And they're so good at it, Atos, that 40% of the appeals have been upheld against decisions to cut the benefits. The only purpose of the interview is to increase Atos profits and cut disability benefits. It's a lie to say that disabled people are are protected in the autumn statement. For example, ESA is including the 1% benefit cut. It's not an uplift, it's a cut. 1 million of disabled people are affected by this. Enforcement of the Disability Rights Act has been fatally reduced by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, having a budget cut by 65% by Liberal ministers, and of course Maria Miller. She got into the cabinet on the back of the disabled. The closure by the Lib Dems and Maria Miller of re-employ and forcing disabled people to apply for jobs that do not exist is immoral. It's a sick joke that employers in the best of economic times do not employ disabled people. I know. To say that there are jobs available from now is a disgrace, actually. To actually pick on disabled people by this Tory government with their Liberal Democrat collaborators is an actual disgrace. Despite all this, I vote for the motion.
Thank you. Under 314 rules of debate, 314.8, it does say speeches should be directed to the matter under discussion. Whilst it was very interesting to hear the views on a wide variety of subjects, if we're going to have anybody allowed to stand up and talk about anything that they wish at any time, we really are going to be here for a very, very long period.
You may speak in a minute, but first I am going to address the issue, and I found that it was sufficiently entertaining for me not wish to hear you stop. And anyway, it did have some bearing on the topic, even if you were unkind to the movers of the motion, bearing in mind that they seem to be supporting what you're saying. But put that aside, I have Councillor Cubitt as the next speaker.
Yes, just to say, I'm going to support the motion. I think it's extremely important, and I think the Coalition and the Conservatives, through Eric Pickles, could not have made it clearer that whilst what has just been said has been said, that the Coalition government absolutely considers it essential that the front end services for the most vulnerable be protected and preserved, and that reserves must be used to spend to ensure that the frontline services that we provide are exactly that, protected and in aid of protecting the most vulnerable in our society. I'm very glad to hear from the Cabinet member that she is going to increase the budget back up to 20,000, but I would like her, if possible, to undertake to look and see whether some of the reserves, of which we have substantial reserves, we're the third richest council in the land, whether we could, whether you could find it in your heart to access some of those reserves, which Eric Pickles has said should be used and spent on the most vulnerable in these straitened times to meet the needs of the people who have sought drop payments today in anticipation of your increase in the budget for next year. Thank you.
I'm not sure that was addressed through the chair, but never mind. The next speaker and last, apart from summing up, is Councillor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Marks, you're quite right, and I will come to you. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the friends in the chamber we have tonight for highlighting the issue that we've already decided to address. So thank you very much for highlighting it. Hopefully we can all agree on it.
Thank you, Councillor Marks. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say, obviously, I'm going to support this, but there seems to be a problem out there with the public and disabled. I, as a council, I know in my own ward we have problems, and I should imagine all you councillors do. Perhaps we need a paper to actually look at this and find out what the big problem is. Because 20,000 or whatever the budget you're putting in to do this is great, but perhaps we need more. So therefore, I would like to see what is actually going on, whether the county council are actually fulfilling their duties as well as us fulfilling ours. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like at some stage a portfolio holder actually come out and give us some briefing on what is actually happening out there so we can actually react to this problem.
I have noted very vigorous nods from the portfolio holder, so I take it that that will be taken into account. Thank you. And with that, Councillor Hussey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the most of my 20 years on this council, I can stand here and say I was proud to be a member of this chamber. But there are occasions when I can't say that. For those people who've hijacked this motion tonight to make political comment, I'm ashamed to be a member of this council. They should not have done so. This is a straightforward motion to look after the needs of residents of this borough, and that's what the motion was about. And I'd like to thank those people who have joined in the spirit of this, and we're going to support the motion to increase it back to the 2009-10 level. But there is confusion. The County Council does do drop curbs at road junctions, when they're resurfacing pavements, etc. But they don't do drop curbs and footpaths with any ease when we're talking about council-owned land, borough council land. Many of the villages around this borough are shared. There'll be a 1 metre strip that is county, then another metre strip which is borough. And in this case, the strip I'm talking to is all borough. And that's why we need the budget restored to its 2009-10 level, because it's not always a matter for Hampshire County Council. Sometimes it really is a matter for this council to do the short sections of footpath. So I don't want to go on. I'm pleased that the level of support that's been given in this debate, and I just urge everybody to vote in favour of this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey. So we'll move straight to a vote on that. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Is that unanimous? I can't see.
Councillor West.
Oh, right. No, right, okay. Those against? So I take it that you're an abstention, Councillor West. Thank you for that, councillors. That was sweet. So that takes us to the second motion, which is affordable property. And we have Councillor Gavin James to put that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just waiting for everyone to get settled. Last time I checked, there are 1,000 dwellings with planning permission in this borough. Central government of all colours are always blaming local authorities for not getting developments done and not giving planning permission. But the reality is there's lots of planning permission out there, but developments just aren't happening for a variety of reasons. This motion hopes to offer a solution to that problem. Many developers are loath to develop developments if they can't be sure of a sale. They don't want to be left with property they have to cut price and therefore lose money. They don't want to be left holding on to property and having to pay interest on the loans they got to build that property. As the motion explains, and I won't go through it all over again, it simply means that we would enter into agreements with developers that if they build homes to an agreed specification in an agreed timescale, and after marketing those properties in an agreed way for an agreed period, we would step in at agreed price to purchase those houses. What we then do with those homes is we'd probably look at using them for rental. We could sell them in the long run, but in the short term we could use them for renting on an affordable basis. And I unfortunately do mean the national government's version of affordable rather than affordable, but there we go. I would imagine that interim rent would be the most appropriate. Those families who are almost ready to buy a house but can't get a deposit together because they're paying high rent. That if they had a few years of affordable rent, they may even decide to buy the property of us. In a way, Mr. Mayor, we're almost building council houses, which will please one part of the chamber, and then selling them, which will please the other. The benefits are huge. There is some financial risk, I admit. But in fact, we could not only increase the supply of affordable homes, we could not only increase the construction jobs and reduce unemployment throughout the borough, we could also, in our specifications, dictate what those homes should be, what climate change criteria they should achieve, and perhaps improve the impact on climate change. And in addition, it would stabilise the borough's finances. As the revenue support grant has fallen, we're more and more dependent upon the new homes bonus. We can't afford a long sustained fall in the number of housing completions because it will have a serious impact on the finances of the borough. And that's why we have lots of reserves, which we'll talk about in February. This motion, if approved and supported, could lead to those homes being developed, us being back in control of the pace of development within the borough. So therefore, Mr. Mayor, it's a win-win with very little risk, and I ask Council to support it.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Gavin James, to please everybody. Councillor Shaw.
Just formally, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. First further speaker is Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful to Councillors Gavin James and John Shaw for the free publicity for this idea on which we've been working for some time. It is a worthwhile idea. However, there are a number of issues that still need to be resolved. There are legal issues around the fact that we don't have a housing revenue account. We need to work through the financial aspects. What would be an appropriate discount on the normal sale price if we purchased the property under the guarantee? What would be the financial risk to the council? Would the benefits outweigh the risk? And are there potential developments that would go ahead with a guarantee but won't proceed without it? As far as I'm aware, the largest stalled schemes, making up the 1,000 that Councillor James referred to, like Merton Rise, are now getting going again without a guarantee. But I would be happy to be told about any scheme where councillors anywhere in the chamber are aware that think that a guarantee would enable building to go ahead. I think that the best way forward is for officers to produce a report which could be considered through Housing and Environment Ofcom. The matter can then come to Cabinet with the benefit of the views of the committee if there appears to be a worthwhile opportunity of this sort. However, Mr. Mayor, a scheme like this would just be one part of a much bigger picture. As I've said in committee and full council, and as the Gazette helpfully reported shortly before the start of this meeting in December, the shortage of new affordable housing is a serious problem for which there is no single solution. We are willing to consider any initiative that will help to address the shortfall in a way that makes good use of the council's resources. Currently, we have the Affordable Housing Reserve, and we are close to agreement with the registered social landlords on how the first tranche should be used. The private sector leasing scheme is up and running. Although technically the properties are in the private sector, the scheme is being run by a charity, Chapter 1, which is also a registered social landlord. The properties will be made to vulnerable households who are unable to secure their own housing in either the social or private sector. I hope that we will soon be able to announce that the first property has been made available under the scheme. The Private Sector Landlords Forum in November was a great success, with 30 potential landlords who are willing to work with the council to make available more rented accommodation. We're exploring the option of buying existing housing to put into the private sector leasing scheme to provide homes for more vulnerable households. Obviously, buying ready-made homes would deliver results much more quickly than waiting for new ones to be built. We're discussing with both the major RSLs and any other RSL who would be interested whether we could invest council money into them in a way that would produce a return for council taxpayers and help to deliver rented accommodation in the social sector where it's needed and at rents our residents can afford. We're also discussing with the RSLs whether there are options for achieving the same social objectives using the council's land rather than our finances. Mr. Mayor, all of this will come to the Ofcom or full council when we have schemes that are ready to proceed. Mr. Mayor, I support this motion, recognising that it needs to go to the Ofcom before Cabinet makes any decisions. Thank you.
Thank you for those helpful comments, Councillor Golding. Councillor Leake.
Mr. Mayor, I shall be brief. Whilst recognising fully the need for more affordable homes, I do not believe it is the role of a local authority to speculate in the property market to achieve that aim. For that reason, I cannot support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Leake. Councillor J. Wardener.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ultimately about helping people into homes, and as the portfolio holder has already articulated, the administration is already doing much to that end. One additional initiative that Cabinet agreed on recently was the local authority mortgage scheme, which I really think is an excellent way of helping people into private housing, helping them find a deposit that allows them to get a mortgage at a decent rate. And I think that's a good use of council assets. This proposal may well have merit, but I think it's important we don't tie up council assets without having given it proper thought and understood fully the value, both social and economic, that can be generated from those. Because, of course, we must remember that the council assets that we do manage keep our council tax the lowest in Hampshire and one of the lowest in the country through the investment returns we get. So, as the portfolio holder articulated, the basis of the motion is something that I agree with, helping people into homes, but to ensure that it's given the proper consideration, goes through overview and scrutiny, I shall be voting against the motion so that that proper process can be undertaken. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor J. Wardener. That is the end of the... oh, sorry, Councillor Cubitt, okay.
I think that the motion addresses some very significant issues which the coalition government has brought up time and time again in recent past. And it's very clear that the coalition government believes that council should be using council land to build socially affordable housing. And therefore, I think it would be slightly peculiar for the Conservative administration today and for most of the fellow Conservative councillors that are here and the Liberal Democrats, obviously it's their motion, but not to support it because it would be counter to what the coalition government is proposing and supporting at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Councillor Gavin James to sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should just remind members that financial investments don't always work out, and there's no benefits to them unless they do work out. Things like this with social benefits, it doesn't matter if you don't make any money because there's a gain for it from somebody like a family who gets a home. So I think it's worth supporting because it's not all about making money. Sometimes it's about making people's lives better.
Thank you, Councillor James. So we move to a vote on motion 2, affordable property. Those in favour, please show. Those against? That's clearly carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Now, there's a mini interregnum because there is a little query about whether something fell off the agenda last time. I'm just clarifying that. Just one moment, please. Okay, order please. There's just going to be a quick explanation from the Chief Executive as to what the issue is.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, and I might well be relying on the memory of either one of the Cabinet members or any of you in the chamber, but I say it's slightly jest, but you'll see the point. If you go to your updates, if you wouldn't mind. If you could look at item 12.2 on page 2 of the update. The officers have just raised a doubt, and credit to them for raising a doubt, because I'd rather have it clarified or not, as to whether at the first part of this meeting we covered items 2, B, C and D. Because members might recall we went to a break, we then brought forward Basingstoke Live because there was public speaking, and a little bit after the event, we're all beginning to nod now, we've realised we've gone straight into the 2 motions, we haven't gone back to cover those 3 items. Now I have to say, Mr. Mayor, that seems to be the case, and can I just say full credit to Julia here, who spotted it because we would have been in danger of missing it. So a thank you to Julia and Mr. Mayor, an apology that we need to go back to cover those 3 items.
Well, my apology as well, and so we will go to that. Has everybody got the necessary update sheet? We're on page 4 of 10, at the bottom, item 2, right? So, the portfolio holder, are you geared up for this task? Councillor Isaac? Over to you.
Given a little time.
I think a little time under the circumstances is reasonable. Are you there now? We're on page 4 of 10 on the update sheet. There's only a need for you to move it, unless you feel uncomfortable about it, but presumably at this stage you wouldn't be.
To establish which one it is.
Thank you. You're there now, yes? It's on page 3492.
Right. Okay, I'm with
Yes?
It's the second one, item 2.
you. This relates to the 2012-13 capital and revenue budget monitoring as at the 30th of September 2012, and I recommend that the motion is moved. The recommendation is made.
Thank you. It was more difficult to get there than to do it, wasn't it? Just to arrive.
The next page.
Yeah. And so we now have the next page, yes? Councillor Isaac, if you wish to move it.
Yes. This is the Treasury Management mid-year report, and I recommend that this is moved. Noted.
Thank you, councillors. I think I'd noted that you noted, Councillor Mitchell. Okay, fine, thank you. We can now move on, now whilst I find my page. Oh, sorry, Councillor Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item D, putting photovoltaic panels on some of our buildings. Good project. Please note it.
Agreed, great. Councillor James, Gavin James.
Mr. Mayor, it's very little and it's very late, but I want to encourage them, so we'll support it.
It has already been done. Councillor Baker, did you want to say something?
Thank you.
I think I just wanted to say hooray, Mr. Mayor, about time.
Thank you. Right, okay, back to the main agenda, and just a moment whilst I find my page. Okay, I think we're back on track, and we're now going to do questions. And the first question comes from Councillor Keith Watts.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, are we taking the minutes? Are we looking at the minutes which come before the questions, I thought?
Yes.
One moment, please.
My apology.
Yeah, we're on page 3, yes, item 14. So I'll give everybody a chance to catch up. It's an orange sheet. You might not like the colour, but it's there. So, question 1 from Councillor Keith Watts. Thank you, Councillor Watts.
As on the order paper, Chairman.
Portfolio holder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The answer is to the first question is electoral services was reviewed as part of the review of democratic services. This included committee services, electoral services and land charges. The ongoing budgeted annual savings from 2013-14 will be £39,400. Due to the timing of the review, these savings were not included in the budget for 12-13. As the final staffing charges did not take place until the end of May 2012, the savings for 12-13 will be £27,766. And sorry, the answer to the second question. The consultant was not employed solely to assist at the PCC elections. As members may know, there were staff changes in the electoral services team at the beginning of this financial year. In order to provide support to the team, it was agreed to appoint a mentor. Initially, the council sought assistance from other authorities, but due to the timing of the PCC elections and the annual canvass, they were unable to assist. As a result of this, officers approached the Association of Electoral Administrators and a mentor was duly appointed. The total cost of this to date has been £12,004. This arrangement has been extremely successful and will come to an end in the first few months of this year.
Thank you, Councillor Eaches. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. If the result of the fit for purpose review and the efficiency and savings review and the restructuring was an organisation that's fit for purpose. Why was this position of a mentor required?
Councillor Aegis.
Well, I think I said that in my answer. It says, in order to provide support to the team, it was agreed to appoint a mentor because of the time of the PCC elections, one was required.
Next question. Question where Councillor Cubitt has been incredibly helpful to the portfolio holder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, as per the order papers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. As you will be aware, officers today delivered to group rooms the site assessment proposals prior to the Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee for next week. This will be followed by a Cabinet decision on which sites are to be worked upon by officers in developing the pre-submission local plan. The site assessment reports will enable councillors to consider those sites which best perform in terms of methodology which we as councillors have endorsed. This step in the process will then enable officers to take forward further work on the agreed sites and consider the cumulative implications of the distribution and sites and enable them to identify key transport infrastructure and indicative costs which will need to be delivered through the local plan period. Once this has been undertaken, the Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee and then Cabinet will be fully informed in these matters before taking decisions on the final content of the pre-submission local plan programmed to take place in March. The pre-submission will then be made available for public consultation in early May. With regard to meeting infrastructure costs, there are a number of funding sources which include developer contributions from S106 agreements, community infrastructure levy, new homes bonus, and other money which may become available via the local enterprise partnership or central government. This includes funding such as the pinch point which we have attracted for the improvements to Black Dam roundabout. I believe it would be irresponsible and negligent for this council not to move forward with its local plan as agreed, so that we are able to control future development in the borough, give our residents certainty, defend against poor development proposals, and not stall this process any further. Thank you.
Thank you. You have tabled a supplementary. I don't think you will wish to speak up to it, or do you wish to just to be carried on? Or was that addressed in what was said to your satisfaction?
No, thank you very much, Councillor Sherlock. It's just that I'm certainly not proposing for the process to be stalled. It's just that we're now in 2012, and we commenced this whole process in 2013, and we commenced this process in 2009. And I say in my supplementary question that I find it extraordinary and extreme, as I know a number of members have also raised this point many times in planning and infrastructure over the last 3 years, that we are required to make decisions on site selection without having a pivotal piece of information. And there is no reason and no excuse as to why this council has not already done the transport work before. It's like the cart before the horse.
Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. By the time the Cabinet make a decision on the final content of the pre-submission local plan for consultation, I expect all relevant evidence to be in place, including draft infrastructure delivery plans setting out the indicative costs and funding sources of the various infrastructure components, including transport, required to support our local plan. However, it's not until the Council formally submits the plan for examination, which we, the Council, make a formal decision on the final version of the plan and the sites we wish to formally allocate. Therefore, any decisions made on site assessment made in January may change as we move through various processes, including public
Councillor
consultation.
Sherlock, is there more than one sentence? Because if so, I'm afraid I have to ask you to conclude. and you can perhaps assist with a written answer.
Yeah, fine. Thank you,
Yes?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'm so sorry because you were being very informative, but I'm afraid I have to stop you. Right, that's the end of the written questions. We move with that to the minutes for report, and I'm taking those as usual en bloc unless I have indications of other wishes. Councillor J. Wardener.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and sorry I was over-eager a moment ago. I have 3 points. First, regarding Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee, pages 3332 onwards. I provided some comments which were read out by my colleague, Councillor Mrs. Tucker, and although a lot of policy comments have been included, I couldn't see mine listed there, and I was just mindful that, of course, Cabinet would want to look at what P&I had said and what members had said, so I just wondered if that could be included.
Does the chairman accept that?
Well, it's very difficult. The best thing to do is turn up, and I should say, I have said to the officers, and I shall say it in advance because it's a good forum to say it, that on Thursday next week, if members, and I include also members of the public, feel that their contribution will last more than 2 minutes, they're perfectly entitled to give written submissions so that the committee can read them and the portfolio holder too. And one often finds with written submissions they are more concise and can be recorded more accurately thereafter by those who need to read them. So all I will say is it is very difficult if members pass on their comments to other people and ask them to reinterpret them for them, especially when the person who is being asked to reinterpret them either A, didn't understand the comment, or B, alternatively may not necessarily have agreed with it. So the best things turn up.
Thank you, Mr.
Very
Mayor.
helpful reply.
I have 2 more. I should just point out, for clarification, I did actually send a written comment to the chairman and vice chairman of the committee ahead of that committee meeting. But full council, pages 3364 onwards, just a point of clarification. Question number 1 on page 3374, that was actually answered by my colleague, Councillor Isaac, as the responsible portfolio holder for that issue. So I just wondered for the record whether that could be corrected, Mr. Mayor.
These corrections should really take place in the committee meetings because...
Paper,
yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, that one is full council. Okay, yes, sorry, yes, fine, yeah.
James, he's got one more.
Yeah, you have another one, yes.
And the last, sorry, Mr. Mayor, and maybe I should raise this at the next EPP, but I did note it when I saw it here, page 3426, that when the council plan was being discussed at EPP, the leader was also present.
Noted. Councillor Gavin James, I understand.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, on page 3374, full council, 11th of October 2012, I asked a question which is written, and we've got the answer. I asked a supplementary question. This was regarding the refurbishment of the malls. I mentioned a local business not being paid by the contractor, and the portfolio holder's response was, I don't think that's my responsibility. I think it's important to store that information on the minutes.
I do remember that, and I take your point. Thank you. I'll try putting my mic on and try again. The rest are now accepted en bloc. And with that, we have reached, would you believe it, the end of our agenda. Thank you for your attendance, all of you. And I hope you have a good year ahead, as I said at the beginning. And thank you for holding an orderly debate towards the end.